digging right into the early life of Paul Smith.
That's right.
We're drawing on a couple of key sources you've provided, the life and times of Paul Smith, and that really candid audio recording, earlydays.mp3.
Yeah, and with those, our mission is to really analyze the foundations of, well, of resilience and character. We're setting the scene back in the 1950s in Bridlington.
A coastal town on the East Yorkshire coast.
Exactly, a bustling place. And we're studying this family dynamic at its core. Five
Yeah.
children, so 4 boys and a sister, and the just the incredible effort of their mother to hold it all together.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because we're not just looking at fond memories, are we? We're trying to analyze the mechanism of stability.
Yeah.
How does this constant squeeze of living in a tiny three-bedroom house, plus these demanding, non-standard work schedules,
Yeah.
how does that produce a stable foundation of care and these deeply respected unwritten rules?
That is the crux of our deep dive.
So we have to start with the physical reality, right? The Smith household on Medford Road.
Mm-hmm.
When they first moved in, you've got a three-bedroom house, and the family is already, expanding. Paul mentions they had 4 boys at first.
Which immediately creates this tight squeeze. I mean, you're talking 2 boys sharing a single bed in each of the 2 boys' rooms. That's already close living.
And it didn't stop there.
No, the accommodation challenge just got more intense. Paul's sister arrived shortly after the move to Bridlington, which made it 5 children.
So what did that do to the sleeping arrangements?
It pushed the boundaries to the absolute limit. Paul actually recounts a time where you had 4 boys sharing one single bed in one room.
4 boys in one bed. I mean, from a modern perspective, that sounds completely impossible. How did that even work?
Well, they used a system they called topping and tailing. So sleeping head to toe to fit 4 bodies where maybe 2 would lie.
And what was his memory of that? Was it just awful?
That's the crucial thing.
Yeah.
His memory wasn't purely negative. He said it was, and I'm quoting here, quite fun at times, only at times.
Only at times. That qualifier is everything, isn't it?
It is. It's honest. It acknowledges the squeeze, but it's immediately balanced by the overall atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
He said despite the crowding, the house was unequivocally full of laughter.
So the lack of physical space didn't mean a lack of emotional space.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And that brings us right to how the household was governed, which was, largely down to their mother.
Right.
The sources are clear that mom was not strict as such, but she was the absolute enforcer of these deep, unwritten rules.
These weren't things written down on a chart.
No?
Yeah.
No, they were just instinctive boundaries. The children learned very, very early what was right and wrong and what you could say and what you couldn't say.
That clarity must have been so important in that kind of high-density environment. If your personal space is basically 0, your social rules have to be rock solid.
Absolutely. And that leads to this fascinating detail about her approach to discipline. Paul's memory is that she never, ever had a go at one of us in front of the others. That was a cardinal rule.
She privatized the correction.
Precisely. She would always take them aside, make sure they were on their own to tell them off. Unless, 2 of them had been bad together, then they get it together.
Right.
But the point is, she avoided public shame. She avoided creating a spectacle where one sibling could feel, superior or inferior to another.
And I wonder if that was even more critical because of the crowding. If you're constantly on top of each other, that potential for friction is huge.
Exactly. If discipline had been public, it could have just festered into long-term resentment in those tight quarters.
But by making it private, she reinforced the rules without, damaging the family unit itself.
It's a remarkable piece of social engineering, really. It stabilized everything and allowed that small house to stay full of laughter.
So that structure was essential, especially when we shift focus to the engine of the home, which was mom's, almost brutal work schedule. Paul says it quite poignantly, they never saw a lot of mom because she was always working.
And it wasn't a job with predictable hours. Life in Bridlington, that coastal town setting, meant work was often tied to the seaside economy.
So long hours.
Relentless.
Right.
Non-standard. And it required immense pre-planning just to keep the home running.
Let's get into that routine. Before she even left for work, she was up at the crack of dawn.
Yep. Tackling the big household chores first, like the washing. But the critical piece of logistics was the food.
The food prep.
Absolutely vital. She wasn't just, putting out some cereal. Before she left, she prepped everything needed for the children's main dinner meal.
So they'd have a proper meal while she was gone.
Exactly. And the way that meal was actually cooked is maybe the most surprising detail.
Okay.
It wasn't the oldest child who cooked it. It wasn't their father. It was cooked at dinner time by the second youngest child.
The second youngest, wow. I mean, that speaks volumes about responsibility and trust.
It really does. The kids were self-managing their own nutrition, maintaining this fundamental routine, all based on their mother's prep work from hours earlier.
It's an efficient system for sure, but that's an extraordinary burden to place on a child, isn't it?
The sources focus less on the burden and more on the seamless routine it became. It seems it was just an accepted reality of a working-class family where everyone had to pull their weight.
And Paul's memory is more about the consistency of it.
Right. The food was always there to be cooked. That's what he remembers, which just speaks to his mother's incredible reliability no matter who did the final step.
And that consistency was needed because her workdays were so long.
Extremely long. She wasn't clocking out at 5. Paul remembers her coming home late, often 9 or even 10 o'clock at night.
That's a huge separation from her children, day in and day out.
It is. And this is the core challenge. You have a mother who is physically absent for most of the day, but somehow she bridged that gap with immense emotional reinforcement. Paul's testimony is clear. He says despite everything, she still showed the love and affection. He said she always made them feel like they were the mainstay of everything.
So the immense physical labor and the scarcity of time, they were fundamentally balanced by this intentional, reliable affection.
That's the synthesis right there.
So despite all this, the long hours, the tight quarters, the overwhelming feeling from the source material is that it was a happy childhood.
Overwhelmingly so.
Yeah.
The provision was consistent. They were well fed, never short of food.
Which was the priority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Paul is quite candid. He says Mom was not the best cook he'd ever known. But he immediately follows that with a more important fact. There was always plenty to eat.
So comfort came from abundance, not from, culinary finesse.
Precisely. And that idea of consistent provision leads us to the most vivid recurring memory in the whole account. The ritual that defined the end of the day.
The nightly vigil.
It's a wonderful detail. Every single night, like clockwork, at 8:30, Paul would go down to the high street.
And wait for her.
And wait at the bus stop for his mom to get off the bus. This wasn't a chore. It was just what happened. A deeply ingrained act of reunion.
And there was a reward for this nightly watch.
There was. She always, without fail, brought chips home from work.
Which Paul described not as a surprise treat, but as an expected thing as such.
And those chips, they symbolize everything we've been talking about, don't they?
Yeah.
It's a small, inexpensive comfort, but it's delivered with 100% reliability.
It's the punctuation mark at the end of a long day.
It is. The physical distance of her long shift just collapsed into immediate, tangible warmth and love the moment those chips changed hands. It was her way of saying, I've been gone, but you are my focus.
So the consistency of the gesture provided the security, not necessarily the gesture itself. A predictable packet of chips at 8:30 p.m. is worth more than a surprise, lavish treat.
Absolutely. Security is built through routine, especially when so much else was, by necessity, unpredictable.
And speaking of routine and security, there was one last unwritten rule for the kids, right? The one that governed their independence.
Yes, the boundary for when to come home. They knew it was time to head back when the streetlights came on.
Another simple, reliable signal.
It all speaks to the clear structure of their life. The children understood the boundaries, whether it was an internal family rule from mom or an external signal from their town.
So let's bring it all back to you, the listener. This deep dive into Paul Smith's early life shows a childhood defined by these incredibly close-knit relationships.
4 boys topping and tailing in a bed.
Right. And it was all structured by these clear, unwritten rules and underpinned by mom's, her intense, labor-intensive devotion, from prepping dinner before dawn so the second youngest could cook.
To that 8:30 p.m. arrival with a warm packet of chips.
The core insight for you here is the transformative power of consistent care when faced with scarcity.
Absolutely. The source material shows how deeply meaningful these consistent routines and small acts of affection can be. They took a scarcity of space, a scarcity of time with their mother, and turned it into absolute emotional security.
The family unit was the mainstay of everything, and they felt it, even if they didn't see mom all day.
It makes you rethink your own priorities, doesn't it?
It really does. In our own busy lives, with all our scheduling and digital communication, we often overlook the power of these small, predictable gestures. So we'll leave you with this provocative thought to mull over. What seemingly mundane routine in your life, whether it's the cup of tea you make for your partner every evening or a story you always share with your kids, when you view it through the lens of Paul Smith's chips, is actually the strongest, most consistent expression of love and stability you offer.
Or that you reliably receive. Think about the chips.